At the bottom of every American kitchen once lived a quiet plan for hard days. This video explores forgotten lunch recipes that families relied upon when money thinned and cupboards echoed. These meals were not symbols of poverty. They were systems of survival shaped by thrift, routine, and care. Each recipe you will hear today was built from ingredients kept on hand and methods passed between generations. They fed workers, children, and elders at midday when energy mattered most. Watching closely matters, because these lunches explain how ordinary households endured scarcity with discipline, memory, and resolve during uncertain American history. Bread and gravy. Part 1 focuses on bread and gravy, a midday meal born from necessity rather than choice. By the early 20th century, many American households baked bread weekly and wasted nothing. Stale slices were never discarded. They were saved for lunches when fresh food was scarce. The meal began with drippings saved from supper. Pork fat, bacon grease, or beef drippings were cooled, strained, and kept in tins near the stove. At noon, a spoon of fat was warmed in a skillet. Flour was added slowly and stirred until pale and smooth. This formed the base of a simple gravy. Salt and black pepper provided the only seasoning. Milk or water was poured in carefully until the mixture thickened. Bread slices were toasted lightly or left plain, depending on fuel and time. The gravy was poured over the bread and eaten hot. This lunch was filling, warm, and fast. It provided calories needed for farm labor, factory shifts, and household work. Bread and gravy appeared in diaries, community cookbooks, and oral histories from the Depression era. It required no fresh meat and little money. The recipe relied on planning rather than abundance. Saving drippings was an intentional habit taught to children. This lunch also carried emotional weight. It reminded families that yesterday's meal could become today's sustenance. Nothing was wasted, and effort was respected. The dish reinforced discipline and patience at the table. Understanding this meal matters because it reveals how American lunches were shaped by endurance. Bread and gravy was not eaten for pleasure. It was eaten to continue the day. This single plate explains how millions endured hardship quietly, one noon meal at a time. Its legacy survives because simplicity, memory, and restraint shaped habits that sustained families long after prosperity returned. Lunch remained dependable, predictable, and quietly essential. Beans and bread. Part 2 examines beans and bread, a midday combination rooted in thrift and routine. Dry beans were inexpensive, durable, and stored in sacks through winter months. Households soaked beans overnight, then simmered them slowly in the morning. Salt was added late to protect texture. Onions or pork scraps appeared when available, but the base remained plain. At lunchtime, beans were ladled into bowls and eaten with bread. Cornbread or yeast bread served as the utensil. This meal delivered protein, starch, and warmth without waste. It also fit work schedules. Pots could remain on the stove while chores continued. Beans and bread appear repeatedly in rural account books and urban relief menus from the 1930s. The dish crossed regions because it relied on common supplies. Navy beans, pintos, and peas all filled the role. Preparation emphasized patience rather than skill. This lunch carried lessons. Children learned to plan ahead, to soak beans before hunger arrived. Adults learned restraint, saving meat for supper or Sunday. Leftover beans became spreads, soups, or fillings, extending value across days. The importance of this meal lies in continuity. Beans and bread stabilized midday energy when wages faltered. It prevented debt at the grocer and preserved dignity at home. Watching the rest of this video matters because each following lunch builds on this principle. Ordinary ingredients, treated carefully, sustained families through long seasons of uncertainty. These meals shaped habits that defined American kitchens for decades. It deserves attention today because it explains endurance without spectacle. Every bowl reflected planning, heat management, and shared time. Noon meals kept bodies steady and spirits measured. They were not celebrations. They were commitments to finish the day and return home prepared for tomorrow. Such lunches shaped discipline, memory, and trust across generations during lean years nationwide within ordinary American households everywhere. Fried potatoes and onions. Part 3 centers on fried potatoes and onions, a dependable American lunch shaped by availability and speed. Potatoes stored well in cellars and bins, making them reliable through winter and early spring. Onions were equally common and valued for flavor and longevity. Together, they formed a filling midday meal that required little preparation. Potatoes were peeled only when necessary. Skins were often left on to preserve nutrients and reduce waste. They were sliced thin to cook evenly in a shallow pan. A small amount of lard or saved drippings heated the skillet. Onions were added first to soften and release sweetness. Potatoes followed, spread carefully to avoid steaming. The pan was left undisturbed to allow browning. Salt and black pepper completed the dish. When bread was available, it accompanied the plate. When not, the potatoes alone sufficed. This lunch provided energy needed for physical labor and household tasks. Fried potatoes and onions appear in farm journals, boarding house menus, and family recollections from the early 20th century. The dish adapted easily. Leftover boiled potatoes from supper were repurposed at noon, reducing fuel use and waste. This meal mattered because it rewarded planning. Saving potatoes, managing fat, and reusing leftovers reflected discipline. It also offered comfort. The smell signaled warmth and familiarity in uncertain times. Its importance lies in repetition. This lunch appeared often, not occasionally. It anchored midday routines when money tightened. Watching further matters because each recipe reveals how lunches supported endurance. Fried potatoes and onions were not elaborate. They were dependable. They kept hands steady, stomachs full, and afternoons possible. This simple plate explains how consistency, not abundance, sustained American families through hardship with patience and quiet resolve. Rice with milk or fat. Part 4 explores rice with milk or fat, a lunch drawn from pantry staples and careful rationing. Rice was inexpensive, lightweight, and easy to store, making it a common reserve in many American households by the early 20th century. It required little fuel and stretched well across multiple meals. Rice was cooked early in the day, often in water with a pinch of salt. At midday, it was reheated and finished in one of two ways. When milk was available, it was poured over the rice and warmed gently, creating a soft, sustaining dish. When milk was scarce, a spoon of lard or saved drippings replaced it, adding richness and calories. This lunch appeared in both rural and urban homes. It required no fresh produce and no meat. Sugar or molasses was added only when supplies allowed. The goal was nourishment, not indulgence. Rice with milk or fat provided warmth and steady energy. It was easy to digest and suited children, elders, and laborers alike. Diaries and household manuals from the Depression years reference rice as a dependable midday filler that reduced the need for costly foods later. The importance of this meal lies in adaptability. One pot served many needs. Leftover rice became supper side dishes or next-day lunches. Nothing was wasted. This lunch deserves attention because it shows how planning replaced abundance. Rice allowed families to control portions and predict meals. Watching further matters because each recipe builds a picture of survival through method, patience, and restraint. Rice with milk or fat sustained bodies quietly, proving that simplicity kept American kitchens functioning during uncertain years. Cornbread and molasses. Part 5 examines cornbread and molasses, a lunch rooted in regional habit and economic restraint. Cornmeal was inexpensive, widely available, and shelf-stable. Many households kept it in covered tins to protect it from moisture and pests. Cornbread required little fuel and could be baked in advance. At midday, leftover cornbread slices were served cold or gently reheated. Molasses was poured sparingly over the top. This syrup provided sweetness, calories, and trace minerals at a time when refined sugar was costly or rationed. The combination was simple but sustaining. Cornbread and molasses appear frequently in Southern and Appalachian food records from the early 20th century. The meal crossed class lines because it relied on staples rather than luxury. It was eaten by children before school, workers at noon, and elders who preferred soft foods. This lunch mattered because it stretched resources. A single pan of cornbread fed a family across several meals. Molasses lasted months and replaced more expensive spreads. The pairing taught moderation and appreciation for what remained available. The importance of this dish lies in endurance. It was not a special meal. It was a dependable one. The sweetness offered brief comfort during long workdays and lean seasons. Watching the rest of the video matters because each lunch reveals a pattern of survival. Cornbread and molasses show how tradition and restraint work together. This meal sustained energy, preserved dignity, and reinforced habits that allowed families to continue through hardship without excess or waste. Potato soup. Part 6 focuses on potato soup, a midday meal built from simplicity and repetition. Potatoes were one of the most reliable foods in American households during the early 20th century. They stored well and provided bulk, making them ideal for soups that stretched across days. The soup began with diced potatoes placed into a pot of water. Onions were added when available. A small amount of salt seasoned the broth. When drippings or lard were on hand, a spoon was stirred in to add body and warmth. Milk was added only if supplies allowed. The soup was cooked slowly until the potatoes softened and thickened the liquid. Potato soup was often made in the morning and reheated at noon. Bread accompanied the bowl, serving as both food and utensil. This lunch was warm, filling, and economical. It required no meat and minimal fuel. Records from relief kitchens and family accounts during the Depression show potato soup as a common midday offering. It suited large households because it scaled easily. Leftovers were expected and welcomed. The importance of this lunch lies in predictability. Families knew it would sustain them through work and school hours. It reduced anxiety by providing certainty when finances were unstable. Watching the rest of this video matters because each meal reflects quiet endurance. Potato soup was not elaborate. It was dependable. It carried families through long weeks by turning stored food into nourishment. This dish explains how patience and routine shaped American lunches during periods of hardship with steadiness and care. Fried cornmeal mush. Part 7 examines fried cornmeal mush, a lunch shaped by advanced preparation and careful use of staples. Cornmeal was a cornerstone ingredient in many American homes because it was affordable and long-lasting. Mush was cooked in the morning or the night before, allowing it to set and be reused. Cornmeal was slowly stirred into boiling water with salt. The mixture was cooked until thick, then poured into a pan to cool. By midday, the firm mush was sliced. Each slice was placed into a skillet with a small amount of lard or saved drippings. The surface was browned until crisp. Fried cornmeal mush was eaten plain or with a small drizzle of molasses when available. It required little fuel and no fresh ingredients. The dish provided energy needed for physical work and could be prepared quickly at noon. This lunch appears in rural household notes and community cookbooks from the early 20th century. It was valued for efficiency. One batch fed several meals. Nothing was wasted. The importance of this meal lies in planning. Cooking ahead reduced stress and conserved resources. The texture and warmth offered comfort without expense. Watching the rest of this video matters because each recipe shows how structure replaced abundance. Fried cornmeal mush reveals how foresight and routine sustained families. This lunch was not chosen for taste alone. It was chosen because it worked, day after day, during lean times across American kitchens. Vegetable stew with leftovers. Part 8 focuses on vegetable stew made from leftovers, a midday meal shaped by thrift and resourcefulness. Vegetables that remained from previous meals, cabbage, carrots, turnips, or beans, were gathered and chopped. Nothing was discarded. Each ingredient was valued for its flavor, nutrition, and ability to stretch the meal. A pot of water or thin broth was brought to a simmer. Harder vegetables were added first, followed by softer ones. Salt provided seasoning, and a spoon of saved drippings or lard added richness. The stew was cooked slowly until flavors blended and the broth thickened slightly. Leftover bread or dumplings could accompany the stew, adding bulk and satisfaction. This lunch appears in diaries, regional cookbooks, and family recollections from the early 20th century. It exemplified frugality and practicality. One pot could feed an entire household with minimal effort and fuel. Leftover vegetables were transformed into sustenance rather than discarded. The importance of this meal lies in flexibility. Families could adapt it to what was available, ensuring nutrition even during scarcity. Children learned the value of patience and careful observation in cooking. Adults learned how to maximize limited resources. Watching the rest of this video matters because each lunch demonstrates a principle. Survival depended on planning, attention, and respect for ingredients. Vegetable stew with leftovers was not luxurious. It was steady, reliable, and sustaining. It shows how ordinary kitchens preserved energy, reduced waste, and maintained dignity during lean seasons, offering lessons about endurance and resourcefulness that remain relevant in understanding American culinary history. Oatmeal porridge. Part 9 highlights oatmeal porridge, a midday meal relied upon for sustenance and simplicity. Rolled oats were inexpensive, shelf-stable, and easy to prepare in large quantities. Households kept oats on hand for both breakfast and lunch, ensuring a reliable source of energy. To prepare, oats were simmered in water or, when available, milk. A pinch of salt enhanced flavor, and occasionally a spoonful of molasses or brown sugar added sweetness. The porridge was stirred slowly until it reached a creamy consistency. It could be served plain or with bread on the side to increase satiety. Oatmeal porridge appears in farm journals, boarding house menus, and household diaries from the early 20th century. It required minimal fuel and no fresh ingredients, making it ideal during times of scarcity. Large pots allowed a single preparation to feed several family members at once. The meal mattered because it offered predictability and comfort. Children and laborers alike relied on it to sustain energy for afternoon work or school. Its preparation encouraged careful measurement, patience, and planning, habits essential during uncertain economic periods. The significance of this lunch lies in its reliability. It was neither elaborate nor luxurious. Instead, it exemplified endurance, stretching limited resources to nourish families quietly and efficiently. Watching the rest of the video matters because each meal demonstrates a principle. Ordinary ingredients, handled with care and foresight, sustained American households through lean seasons. Oatmeal porridge reminds us that consistency, discipline, and respect for simple foods were central to the survival of ordinary families in American history. Pancakes from leftover batter. Part 10 examines pancakes made from leftover batter, a midday meal born from thrift and foresight. Families often prepared a larger portion of batter during breakfast or the night before. Rather than discard it, the batter was reserved for lunch, conserving both ingredients and time. The batter, composed of flour, eggs, milk or water, and a pinch of salt, was stored briefly until noon. When it was time to eat, a small skillet was heated with lard or drippings. Spoonfuls of batter were poured and cooked slowly until golden on both sides. Leftover pancakes were eaten plain, with a drizzle of molasses, or paired with a bit of butter when available. This practice appears in farm journals, community cookbooks, and personal diaries from the early 20th century. It allowed households to stretch food, reduce waste, and provide a filling, warm meal without additional effort. Pancakes could feed children returning from school, laborers on short breaks, or elders requiring soft foods. The importance of this lunch lies in efficiency and resourcefulness. Using leftover batter conserved fuel, time, and ingredients while maintaining a steady midday routine. It reinforced habits of careful preparation, patience, and respect for provisions. Watching the rest of this video matters because each meal demonstrates how ordinary foods sustained families through scarcity. Pancakes from leftover batter were not indulgent. They were practical, nourishing, and dependable. This simple plate exemplifies how planning and frugality allowed American households to endure lean periods with consistency, care, and quiet resilience. It shows that every ingredient had purpose, and every meal reflected survival shaped by discipline and tradition. These 10 lunches reveal more than recipes, they reveal resilience. Every ingredient, every method, and every midday plate tells a story of households surviving scarcity with care, patience, and foresight. Bread, beans, potatoes, and rice were not just food, they were lessons in planning, discipline, and resourcefulness. By understanding these meals, we see how ordinary Americans navigated hard times with dignity. If you have enjoyed rediscovering these vanished lunches, subscribe to America's Lost Recipes. Each week, we bring forgotten recipes back to life, connecting history to your kitchen and keeping the stories of survival and tradition alive for generations.